God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. Well, today we continue in the Gospel with the idea of forgiveness that we began in some ways last week when the question was, what do I do if someone in the church does something bad to me? Matthew writes in his Gospel a series of steps that have to be done, including at the end, if after all your efforts, nothing works, treat the person as a tax collector, which Matthew knows what that was all about, because he was one before Jesus called him to follow him, or a pagan, a Gentile. That does not mean we abandon the person. That means we have to try harder to bring him into the fold of Christ. And today now we find Peter going to Jesus and saying, Lord, how many times do I forgive someone in the church if they have offended me? And Jesus and Peter, I'll tell you how Peter, trying to be real cool and smart, says 7 times? And Jesus says, no, Peter, no, got that wrong again. It's 77 times, and sometimes we've heard translations will have 7 times 7, 49 times. We really don't know, and it's not important, the number. The whole point is that we are supposed to forgive. Now, we're already into the 2nd week of the holy season of football. And I know the boys kick off at 3:30. I won't keep you that long. But you know by now that there is video replay or replays, and the umpires can go and put on all their gear, and they look and look and look and look and look. And by the time they get through looking, you and I have had a chance for a Coca-Cola, going to the bathroom, and we already got the answer because they've shown it to us. Okay? And then they come back and they say those famous words. After further review. Okay? So I'm going to say to you that after further review, what we heard yesterday in the Gospel of Matthew and what we hear today are not necessarily Jesus' words. This is not heresy. But there's a key word that is used, and that's the word church, ecclesia. There was no term like that when Jesus was around. There was no term like that for those who followed Jesus. They were members of the way, not a church. It is later on in the epistles that we find the saints in the church at Ephesus. The saints in the church at church became something later, not at the time of Jesus. And I say that to you because we're not always offended by someone in our church. It goes beyond that. The walls come down and the world is around us. And that is the world that sometimes we find very, very unfair. And for those of us who've had the blessing of little ones, how many times in our lives as parents have heard, it ain't fair. Oop, got it. She looked at Mom's. It's not fair. And when it's not fair, we become jealous of others who have perhaps things that we don't have or are able to do things that we cannot do. And that's one of the most basic elements in the makeup of human beings is envy, jealousy. The Bible is full of them. Why did Cain kill Abel? Because Abel brought to God the best that he could, and Cain brought some of the produce, as it is said in the book of Genesis. And God liked what Abel brought, but did not like what Cain brought, and Cain got jealous of Abel and killed him. Joseph, favorite of his dad, with a coat of many colors, which, by the way, just meant long sleeves. And his brothers sell him. because they were envious of him. The prodigal son's brother, I was with you all this time. And you do that for this little imp that comes back. Jealousy, envy, Jonah. I don't think we'll ever know what it was like in the belly of a big fish. I wonder what all other things were in the belly. Right? You might have bile and other things that we don't talk about. It wasn't Jaws where you could have a tire and a tube of metal or whatever because they eat anything. We do not know, but Jonah becomes very upset and jealous because after going through all that, God forgives the people at Nineveh because they repented. And Jonah is not happy. And today Paul says, why do you judge your neighbor? You're not to do that. Well, it's because life is not fair. And when life is not fair, we do not like the blessings that other people receive. If life were to be fair, all men would look like maybe Eric Dane in the TNT series, The Last Ship. Chiseled face, extremely virile, can handle not only the helm of the ship, but a rifle. And all the women on staff and those who are not on staff kind of look at him like, Or maybe like Jamie Foxx, award-winning actor, with great wit and wonderful way of being. Or maybe aging Tom Cruise. If we remember, he started out by dancing rock and roll in his underwear, and everybody loved it. But I really think that the one that tops the bill right now is Ryan Gosling. I really think so. Wouldn't you like to have the steps that he managed to do in La La Land? Have that rhythm, that flow, and be able to lift your shirt tail and see a ripped midsection? Wouldn't that be great? But life ain't fair. Now ladies, you know, it happens that Scarlett Johansson, not only being beautiful and very, very bright, she's now been trained to be a killing machine in the last 3 movies that she's made, so be careful. Or Gal Gadot, the new, very, very desired by directors and producers, the new Wonder Woman. But my list does not go beyond only one. She lives down the highway, Sandra Bullock. She lives in Austin. I do have her address, but I'm afraid of being called that I'm stalking her, so I promise not to do that. Or for those of us who were around when the original 10 was there, Bo Derek. Life would be fair if we all had the money that T. Boone Pickens has, or maybe the wit of Woody Allen, or the physique of Arnold Schwarzenegger at the height of his competitive years, and the selfless devotion of Mother Teresa. But life being what it is, most of us end up with a physique like Woody Allen and the selfless devotion of Genghis Khan. So life isn't fair. Why does it bother us when others have something that we don't have? Well, again, envy. We allow envy to come in. I want to illustrate that with a story of envy between a new priest and the minister of music in a church. When a church goes through the transition between one priest to another, natural leaders arise and help navigate during that period of time. And I know some of you have done that here before the arrival of Father Keith. You navigated that. And in this case, the person that anchored the liturgy and pretty much took over the liturgy was the music director. Upon the arrival of the priest, who was touted to be a great liturgist and a wonderful preacher, the focus and the interest shifted from the music director to the priest, and that is when things did not go well. The first week, the pastor, the priest, preached on commitment and how we should all dedicate ourselves to the service of God. The music director that day chose the song, "I Shall Not Be Moved." The second week, the pastor preached on tithing, the importance of tithing, time, talent, and treasure, and how we should gladly give to the work of the Lord. That day, the song that was picked was "Jesus Paid It All." The third week, the priest preached on gossiping and how we should bridle our tongues and watch out what we said. The music director led the song, "I Love to Tell the Story." With all going on, the priest became very upset and began to think about leaving, considering resigning, and he shared that from the pulpit with the congregation. That day, the music director chose the song, "Oh, Why Not Tonight." As it came to pass, the priest did resign, and on the last day, as he was saying goodbye, he informed the congregation that it was God, Jesus, who had brought him there, and it was Jesus who was calling him to go and serve at another place. At which time the organ began to play, "What a Friend We Have in Jesus." Jealousy. Jealousy stems from a feeling of insecurity of our own selves. If we feel good about ourselves, what do we worry about others' accomplishments or the things they own, the things they have, positions, gifts, etc.? But if we feel unacceptable, then we're envious of others. To illustrate this, I want to go back to 1903. I wasn't there, but this I read. Henry Ford hired Mr. James Couzens, who had all the gifts that Henry Ford did not have, and that was the gifts of administration, marketing, finance, and sales. Unfortunately, as years went by, Mr. Couzens became too effective. He was bringing in new ideas and new ways in which the factory could work better, more efficiently, and some changes that needed to be made in the Model Ts. And that did not settle well with Mr. Ford because he was jealous of all the ideas and all the progress that Mr. Couzens was bringing, and fired him in 1917. And Henry Ford continued to build Model Ts until he almost broke the Ford Motor Company. The little voice inside of us tells us that we're being threatened because somebody else is successful. We need to be careful. Envy springs from a basic insecurity about our own self-worth. Anytime that we're envious of someone, you can make sure that that individual has never fully realized his or her gifts. There was a famous fable about a jealous eagle. This eagle had been in that canyon in Colorado for many, many years. It was the finest eagle until another one came and began to fly and flew higher than the jealous eagle, at which time the jealous eagle gets a hunter to try to shoot that eagle down with his arrow. But the arrow could not fly high enough because it did not have enough feathers. So the eagle begins to give the hunter feathers so that the arrow could reach that other eagle, because he was jealous of the height of the flight of the eagle. So many feathers did he give that he could no longer fly, at which time the hunter killed the eagle on the spot. Who pays the price for being jealous, for being envious? While we're being jealous and being envious, the other people are out dancing and having a great time. We need to be aware of that. I was always very bothered by being picked the last to be a part of a team in sandlot football. And I tried harder and harder and harder to be better and better and better than anybody else on the field. Sometimes I achieved it, sometimes I did not. And the days that I did not, I went home just totally devastated. And it was not until I became older and hopefully wiser that I began to realize that I did not have to show anybody anything because someone had already shown me his love for me. And that's what I always think on Good Friday. When I look at the cross, the words are, "You are worth the whole world to me. I love you so much that I'm going to allow myself to be nailed to a cross and die for you." You see, you're not a failure, you're not a loser, but you're my child. We are children of the living God. And imagine how frustrated God must be when He looks into our hearts and we don't feel that, looks into our minds and we don't think that. How would you feel if something that you worked on for a long time, something worth keeping, something valuable to you, is being destroyed every day? Or if that same creation is destroying itself. God has created us to be beautiful, and we are. He's given us eternal value. He died for us once for all, so that we can be saved for eternity. We're totally unique in His eyes. Imagine that. Totally unique in God's eyes. And because of that, we don't have to compare ourselves to anyone else. We don't have to prove anything to anyone else. And we do not have to put others down on the way up to look better. We are loved. We're loved by our Creator. God is in love with you. God is in love with you. And faith in His love will lift us to a different plane of understanding where we need to never be bothered by jealousy or envy. I want to end with a quote by Brother Damasus Winson, abbot of Mount Savior, Benedictine monastery. And upon his deathbed, he must have known something about his brothers because he left them with the following. When I look back upon the 70 years of my own life, I see quite clearly that I owe my present inner happiness, my peace, my confidence, and my joy essentially to one fact. I am certain and I'm infinitely loved by God. To me, that's a real source of peace, happiness, and self-worth. That we are infinitely loved by God, where He died for us, and He lives again for us. And I think that's a heck of a good deal. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.